Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today's topic is Salesforce, security, everything you need to know in 2024. This conversation is going to be for you if you are at all involved with Salesforce or just curious about Salesforce. So if you are Salesforce admin or developer, manager, director of business applications, VP of IT, CIO, you use Salesforce in your org, you're learning about Salesforce, we're going to be talking about some fun things that I think you will enjoy. I am Adrienne Shulman. I am from Tenger Ways. Tenger is a technology consulting company. We are focused on the CIO space. So we're helping companies optimize any and all of their internal technology that is foundational to running a business. We believe if you improve how you use technology internally, you can improve your business performance. Our specialty is modern practices. So we're taking practices developed in that high-tech digital world. So think DevOps, lean, agile, cloud, AI, and applying that to the world of traditional IT. I'm here today with two of my colleagues. Daniel Keith is my co-founder. Good morning. Hello, Daniel. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you. And I'm also joined by Sandi Nuss Zellner. Sandi is our Salesforce Practice Lead, 5-time Salesforce MVP, a lifelong learner, and a natural teacher. Good morning, Sandi. How are you?
Good morning. I'm just fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you
Great.
both.
Great to be here. Are you guys ready to talk about Salesforce and security?
Absolutely.
My favorite subject.
The best. So the two of you have recently published a 3-part blog series deep diving into Salesforce and security. So I really want to use that as our kind of topic for today and do some deep dives and probe further into some of the stuff you wrote about. But before we do the deep dive, I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and just kind of talk high level Salesforce security. Like what are we even talking about? Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay, so first question. When we talk about Salesforce and security, here's what I want to know. What the heck are we even talking about? What does security mean in the context of Salesforce? So Salesforce is a SaaS application. It's in the cloud. I'm pretty sure someone told me when I moved to cloud, I don't have to worry about infrastructure anymore. So I assume we're not talking about firewalls and encryption and things like that, but what is it? So just kind of at that high level, who wants? Sandi?
Sure. I think in general, whenever we're talking about security, I think about two main things. How are we keeping the information that we keep in these systems safe? And how are we controlling who has access to do things and who doesn't? I think that's the two big things, right? Like we talk about we're using our technology to handle and control and keep track of a lot of different things, and we really need to make sure that that data is kept in the hands and in the eyes of the right people. So Salesforce security to me is kind of that those two things: who can see it, who has access to it, and who can do what with it.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's really all
absolutely. And
about kind of data,
that's
Yeah.
the
right?
that's the beauty of a SaaS application in Salesforce in particular. It abstracts away all of the infrastructure concerns that you might be thinking. You don't have to worry about whether or not you have enough storage. You don't have to worry about whether or not you have redundant storage, or whether or not your firewall is up to date. All that's been abstracted away, and you don't have to care about it. But what is security ultimately? Security is um, protecting our ability to operate. When it's all said and done, that's what it is: protecting our ability to operate. So we've worked with one client in particular that comes to mind. We did a forensic analysis for them because they needed to figure out why they suddenly had a competitor that seemed to know everything about their business. And what they discovered was that they had provided permissions to one of their team members, export all data permissions to that team member. And he had absolutely exported all that data before he left the company and joined the new company. And so that is one method of security that that frankly we're going to be talking about today that is a huge concern within Salesforce is who you're giving permission to, what level of permission you're giving to them, and what they're able to do with that data. So protecting our ability to operate, whether it be stuff like cross-site scripting or keeping our managed packages up to date, or just who we're giving access to and what level of access.
Okay, that's a frightening story.
Yeah.
And really, I think when we're thinking of Salesforce, so Salesforce is a CRM, customer relationship management platform. So like, I think it's just important to think about like, what is the data you have, and I think of the people who work in security, the people who are data privacy specialists, your compliance officers, your CISOs. They know inherently of like, it's very important to secure data. I think a lot of what I've seen is companies as they grow, it's, SaaS application, build it. What's the most important thing is empowering your salespeople. So and when you're small, there's not as much data to protect. But I think what we're talking about is like, I guess that's, can you just share a little bit, and again, super high level, why is data in Salesforce so much more important to secure than maybe some other SaaS applications? And I think you kind of hit on it, but maybe I'm answering this, but it's
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, but when you think about customer relationship management, it's not just the sales process. It's everything from marketing all the way to service and customer success and contract lifecycle management and configuring pricing and quoting. All of that takes place within Salesforce. So now my contracts are in there. My everything about my relationship with that customer is in Salesforce. It is, for many companies, the linchpin of the entire organization. It is their single source of truth.
Anything to add, Sandi?
Oh, I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like so many businesses can use Salesforce in different ways so that being that single source of truth, it can be a treasure trove of not only what has happened with your customers, but what is planned. There's a lot of things that, even from a maybe a private equity firm, right? Like we're planning to think about, how are we going to invest our funds if that kind of information gets to the wrong people, and also not necessarily just internal persons, right? So when we talk about security here, we're saying it could be maybe information that gets passed from one system to another. We need to think about that. Humans, as well as we also hijackers out there, cyber criminals. We just need to think about, are we being smart about how we approach just that conversation from that there's lots of ways that we could access information that's important, and yeah,
Right.
that single source of truth, it can be a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and this is a lot of the stuff we think about kind of securing any application. So sometimes the call is coming from inside the house, and sometimes there are bad actors outside the house as well. So good thing. So I would ask you whose responsibility is security, but I think we all know the answer, which is it's
Everybody.
2024. Yeah, it's 2024. We can't still be having this conversation. And that's why I thought this conversation was so good, and like the audience is so wide. So yes, we're going to can talk about specific tactical things that you should be doing today to secure your Salesforce organization or your platform. But it's not just about configuration. It's how do you think about security. So let's go into some of the weeds. The first part of the blog post series that you did was all about installed packages. So someone want to educate me what the heck is an installed package?
I think that that's probably a really good place to start, is what is a managed package and why would you think about using one? Salesforce, being a SaaS application, does allow for many different functions, but there are some times when your business might need an additional extension of functionality that is not natively included in the Salesforce features. So there is this concept of managed packages that is a pre-built bundle of functionality that may be very specific to a purpose or an objective and an intent. So I think of it very similarly to when I have my iPhone. and I go to the App Store, and if I want to do something specific, maybe if I want a fitness app to track my daily walks or something, I go to that App Store. I'm downloading that app, and so I have that feature set already allowed to me. And so that's really what the purpose of managed packages are, is to kind of bring in a pre-built set of functionality.
The challenge with installed packages is, unlike the iPhone, unless I jailbreak my iPhone, I can't write my own custom code that's going to run on that iPhone. I can on Salesforce. And so I can't just blindly update an app on Salesforce because it might break the custom functionality that I've built. So it has to be a much more deliberate DevOps driven process to make sure that these installed packages are kept up to date. The average Salesforce org has 14 installed packages in it. 99% of all orgs have an out of date installed package in them. 99%. So that kind of gives you an idea of the challenge.
Daniel, I need to back up because you said something that I want to get clarity on.
Yeah.
I don't. So you bring up and Sandi brings up kind of the iPhone or App Store example, and I think that's a great example because whether you're Android or iOS, most everyone I know has a smartphone and the ability to download and extend the functionality of your phone based on what someone else has built, and that's great. So the two things I want clarity on are number one is on the iPhone in particular and iOS, and what Apple has done is not anyone can throw up an app. You have to go through the App Store, and it has to go through. There's a checklist of security. It has to meet certain requirements. And so question one was: does everything that you can get from Salesforce when you download a managed package or an installed package to extend, can I trust them? How are they being signed off? Like, does Salesforce, is it kind of like use at your own risk, or are there vulnerabilities in there? Now, obviously, I should also caveat there are things on my iPhone that will present security risk. So so just kind of understanding how can I think about those versus, because Daniel started talking about custom code. And I know we're going to talk about that later, which is yes, even without, unlike your iPhone, right? Even without managed packages, I can always write custom code in my own app. So just specific to these installed packages, what sort of security concerns do they present?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, there is a actual rigorous process that Salesforce has set up to allow an app or a managed package to be placed on their own app exchange. So the developers are responsible for getting their app to pass those security checks from Salesforce at the time of when they publish it. So, Daniel, I think you did. I remember you had a
Yeah.
personal story about dealing with the App Exchange and kind of getting a managed package out there.
Yeah, so this was back. That was probably seven years ago or so. This was back before Salesforce had a Google Drive integration native to the platform. We actually built a Google Drive integration, and we built it probably less than 3 months. We built the entire app, and it was great. We asked some test clients that we installed it. And I'll get to that, how we installed it there, even though it wasn't on the App Exchange. I'll get to that in a second. But then we went to Salesforce and said, hey, we want to put this on on the App Exchange. And they're like, great. First thing, you got to go through our security review. 6 months later, we finally got it approved to be on the App Exchange. And that's how rigorous the Salesforce security review process is. It's great. It's phenomenal. Frankly, it helped us uncover serious flaws with the application that we originally wrote. But here's the thing. There's actually 4 levels of managed package and customization within Salesforce. There's the App Exchange, which is a managed package that's on the Salesforce App Exchange and it's gone through the rigorous review. There is a managed package that I can actually install, that I can privately list. And so it doesn't go through the security review because it's just a private listing. And then there is packages that I can install just on my own org or on somebody else's org without Salesforce's permission. And then there's obviously customizations and capabilities that I can do that aren't actually a managed package, they're unmanaged packages. So those 4 levels, only one of those is going through Salesforce's security review.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So I know, at least for me, I have a better sense of kind of the overview of managed packages. So
well, and actually, I was gonna talk on the customization point. So all of those managed packages are in your org, or unmanaged packages. They're an installed package. They may be managed, they may be unmanaged. But the point is that they're in your org, and then you're building customizations against them. Remember, you have Salesforce objects that are containing data. Those objects have custom and standard fields in them. And you're augmenting both Salesforce and those packages with the customizations that you need to run the business that you want your way. And to do that, you have to make sure that whatever changes are made to those packages are accommodated by the customizations that you've made in your org. And that's where the whole DevOps and process can come in to make sure that that what you do stays up to date. And that's why so many packages fall out of date and aren't updated.
Yeah, and actually, I was reading. So our partner Hubbl Diagnostics put out a recent benchmark report on Salesforce and cited 99%. So let's just say everybody. That's you, right? If you're listening, you're in the 99%. Okay, so 99% of orgs have out of date installed packages. Okay, so what does that mean? Why should companies care? And I'm a little bit of like, oh, if everyone else has out of date packages, maybe it's not such a big deal. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I think why should you care? The world of technology and internet-based technology is constantly changing, right? And items that may not have been a concern 5 years ago when you install the package, maybe it's from some sort of cross-scripting attack, or a bad actor is out there and is creating some new way to try to hack systems, right? So we have other things that are patches or things that are specifically designed to kind of guard us against those bad actors. But if we have an installed package, a managed package or something like that, that is old and out of date, that hasn't been updated to address the defense against those types of things, that can be a concern. Or maybe even just that functionality no longer works, or it works differently now. And I think from a managed package, or excuse me, an installed package perspective, not only are we thinking about security risks, but also, does that still add value to our Salesforce instance in general? So, but keeping an eye on things after you have installed them is always, I think, a best practice and a good idea to understand, what is this still doing?
Yeah,
keep track.
Makes a lot of sense, and it kind of reminds me of that just the DevOps refrain, which is like, when something's painful, you're supposed to do it more often, not less often. But probably updating packages, reviewing what you have in your legacy code, what you've done years ago. You don't prioritize it, you ignore it. Now it gets a lot bigger and it becomes much more painful. To your point, Daniel, of like, you've not just taken, it's not like an app on your phone, which is isolated. It's functionality you've built all this gnarly stuff around. So it becomes hard. So you don't do it. And because you haven't been hacked, or you haven't had a breach, or you haven't had a security incident, you have probably a unrealistic sense of security or safety. So
you're exactly right. You asked, why should we care? If 99% have out of date packages, why should we care? And the problem is, it's not an issue until it is. And like Sandi said, there's new vulnerabilities that are being discovered every day, literally every day. And the installed package that you installed a year ago, I guarantee, is vulnerable. And so from a vulnerability perspective, it's extremely important to keep these up to date, but we don't. Well, why? Because it's really hard. Frankly, before services like Tenger Thrive, which is an ongoing managed service, until we started providing services like that, and we started being able to use tools like Hubbl. Hubble's only a year and a half old now. Before that, there wasn't any real convenient way to actually know whether a package was even out of date. So between Hubbl and our Tenger Thrive service, now we have a solution to actually make sure that these stay up to date and that we're proactively taking care of our clients.
And that was going to be my next question before we move on to the next kind of big topic, which is, what should someone do? Okay, so I've just told you you have out-of-date packages and you're at risk. Okay, what do I do? And I think you got to make it visible, right? You have to even know how many packages you have, how many are they out of date. So that was my question to you, is kind of like, what's the what's step one for doing that? And you bring up tools
And
like Hubbl Diagnostics and partners like Tenger, of course, but anything else,
but that's why I mentioned the Tenger Thrive piece, not just the Hubbl piece. It's we can use Hubbl to surface out of date packages, but then you have to have the knowledge, expertise, and capability to know and understand what to do and how to resolve that. Because again, you can't just say package A is out of date, hit the update button, we're good to go. You have to do the analysis to actually understand what are going to be the impacts to that. What are going to be the business impacts? You can actually set it up to automatically update an install package, but virtually nobody in an enterprise world does that, because that could literally wipe out some of your workflow automation. So you have to have the capabilities to actually discern what you should do with the information that you get from Hubbl.
You just said so many things that I want to double click on, but I'm not, because I'm going to show I am I get overly excited when I see similarities between software engineering and kind of just basic architecture. And Sandi, I know you're a huge proponent of well-architected framework of just kind of modularity and safe, but we got to move on. So I'm going to shelve that. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive all into that another time. I want to move on to custom code. So I think everyone and their mother knows what custom code is, but I'm still going to ask you, what's custom code when it comes to Salesforce?
Well, in a very similar fashion that you can extend Salesforce with installed packages for functionality that's specific to your business, you can also have the approach of you would create that functionality extension yourself through writing your own custom code. So it's from a why do we use it? It's very similar. It's that extend that functionality that does not come out of the box with Salesforce. So you might have a particular need, a requirement that is just beyond the capability of the base functionality of the platform. And then, yes, we can write custom code to get there. And I think making sure that you're writing that code to fit within the advised security parameters is a very important thing for developers to think about, and also for admins to understand what makes custom code, what makes it safe. I highly recommend that every admin at least try to kind of skill up a little bit on understanding what should I be asking the developers to show me that is my custom code safe. And there are some things in there. Number one, you want to make sure that my biggest question I want to ask a developer is, are you respecting my security model that I've set up, right, as an admin? Because there are ways that developers can say, oh, nope, I want to make the system do whatever I want it to whenever I want. That can be an interesting conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we work with a very large Fortune 500 company, and They had massive amounts of administrative capabilities, which I'll talk about here in a second, and obviously massive amounts of custom code. Custom code in Salesforce is Apex. Apex is basically a derivative of totally blank of Java. It's basically a derivative of Java, but it's custom built specifically for Salesforce and specifically for business applications. And and so we started doing an inventory of this Fortune 500 companies' custom code, and I can't tell you how many times the code had administrative credentials hard coded into the code so that they could bypass the security model that had been set up by the admins. And maybe it was done just while they were testing, and they never thought to remove it when it went to production. But the bottom line was they hard coded this. It was easy that way, and obviously a very bad idea. You should never hard code credentials. I think three of us know that, but just for sake of saying it. And then I wanted to mention one other thing, just the different levels, just so we're level setting people that aren't familiar with Salesforce. We mentioned installed packages. Okay, so that's one way to customize Salesforce. Then there's custom code. Okay, and custom code actually comes in two flavors. There's Apex, which is kind of like the back end stuff. That's the brains that's creating automation in the back end. But there's also front end code that you can use to make things look and work more in a better way, in a custom way, in the interface. So that's kind of like what you would see on a website. Okay, so you have that custom code capability as well. And then the next level, which is really what you want to do as much of your customization as possible on, is what's called clicks, not code. Okay, and that's where you're using Salesforce's clicks capabilities, such as Process Builder. Should I be saying Process Builder?
No, we can't say that anymore. We can't make any new ones. You can say flow.
Flow. There you go.
Yep.
Now you guys know how old I am. But Flow, I knew as soon as I said it, I was saying the wrong one. But Flow, which is where you're literally dragging and dropping to build new capabilities, new automation, and then the fourth level, which is pure out of the box, and that's where you're leveraging Salesforce the way that it was originally built.
Yeah, and I would even you want to flip those, right? So kind of preference for out of the box.
Yes.
Then flow, then custom code, then installed packages. Is that right? So one other question, because we talked about Apex, SOQL
Yeah.
What is it? I assume it sounds a lot like SQL.
In some ways, it is a lot like SQL.
Yeah. Is it for
So
querying
it's
Salesforce
SOQL.
language for querying
I've always
Salesforce
called it
objects?
SOQL. I've always
Yeah.
called it SOQL, and it stands,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, for Salesforce Object Query Model, Object Query
Language.
Language. And basically, it's very much like SQL. It's a way to query your data.
And the reason I asked that is because that was in your blog, you kind of cited three things to look out for. Like, what are the three main vulnerabilities? Everybody, by the way, it sounds like everybody's going to use some level of custom code. As much as we all prefer out of the box and clicks over code, the power of Salesforce and the reason you're using Salesforce is because you want it customized to your org, and people tend. I mean, I've not really worked with any company I've seen that doesn't have some amount of custom code. Also citing the Hubbl benchmark report, just that the average org has 2,000 custom security issues. So it means you've got custom code and there's something, it may be as egregious as you've got hard-coded credentials. It may not be as egregious as that. But the first one that you talked about have to do with SOCL injections. That scares me. I know the world of SQL injections, which is around bad actors coming in and manipulating code and saying, let's say I write a command that is going to pull one record out of a database and someone can manipulate it and hijack all of my data. Is that the same thing in Salesforce?
It's pretty much the same concept, right? So again, you would have to have a bad actor of some sort, or I think probably maybe even like a developer you let in there, if you don't really check your custom code, could theoretically, but the SQL query is truly that. It's querying the database for something and returning that result, and it has the you can then return it and then manipulate it as well. But yes, so I think we would want to double check to make sure we are safeguarding against SQL injections. So somebody outside or inside of our Salesforce org couldn't have access to our data.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the idea. So obviously, this is being transmitted over the web, and so if you have and so that query, that SQL query, is being transmitted over the web. Well, if I can submit a query as a hacker that does that is framed exactly right, but adds additional parameters such as administrative credentials into that, then suddenly I can query your data and get that data sent to me. Okay, and so that's what we're talking about when we talk about SOC injection. Is we're literally injecting a additional information into the SOC request. And it can be enormously dangerous because of exactly what we were talking about, because it gives them access to your data, and frankly, even beyond your data. You can use a SQL query to query anything in Salesforce, including the security layer. So, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And now what about cross-site scripting, which is another vulnerability that comes with custom code? What is it and what do I need to know about it?
I'm waiting for Sandi to reply. I can reply.
Go for it.
Yeah, so basically, cross-site scripting is an exploit, and it's the same concept. So it's where you're injecting. So if you've ever done like F12 on your browser, then you can actually see all of the super awesome code that's behind the web page that's been built out. Well, that same thing is true of Salesforce. You have all this super awesome front end code that has been built out to actually create the page that you actually see in Salesforce. And that's why Salesforce runs in a browser. Well, if I can inject my own piece of code into everything that you see on that web page, then all of a sudden, maybe I can manipulate it in such a way that I can actually get access to your org, and I can actually manipulate it to get information from your environment. And that's possible because of Salesforce's power, and it's outside of Salesforce's control because it depends on what you've written as far as your web pages, unless, of course, you're using Salesforce's built-in capabilities where they have obviously made sure that it's not hackable. So the long and short of it, and there's a lot to this, but the long and short of it is it's allowing bad actors. It's making sure that bad actors cannot add scripting to your web page in such a way that allows them access that they shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to echo something that Daniel kind of just said there to really make sure that we're expressing this well, is that the things that we're talking about truly here that are the concerns are the things that you as your own business have chosen to do to Salesforce on top of Salesforce. So these are things that Salesforce takes care of this for you until you do something else to Salesforce. So I just wanted to make sure that we're saying that this is the things that we're choosing to do it that we need to think about.
That's exactly right, Sandi, and that's why we constantly, you mentioned earlier about every org's going to have some level of custom code. I would nuance that, and I would say as much as possible, stick with out of the box where you're using the core Salesforce functionality, and then if you do need something custom, leverage Salesforce's built-in clicks automation, okay? Because all of that is going to follow Salesforce's framework, and including their security piece. And as a rule of thumb with large enterprises, this is with large enterprises that are highly complex. we say 70% of your automation should be clicks, not code. 70%. And that's at a very large, complex organization. So for mid-sized organizations, virtually all of their automation should be clicks, not code.
All right, so I'm going to summarize everything we said about custom code in a few things. So this is what I've heard is, and different than we started talking about managed packages, which is extend my Salesforce functionality with someone else's code. Custom code, super powerful. I can do whatever I want in Salesforce, and I'm kind of, the magic line, with great power comes great responsibility. So the minute, right? So everyone's doing it, but the minute that I, as an organization, want to get more out of my Salesforce that I can't just do out of the box, I am exposing myself to vulnerabilities. And Sandi, in the very beginning of this kind of, when you're talking about the things admins should be doing and the things you should be doing almost as you're writing code, checklists. And it just sounds like DevSecOps, dare I say, right? Which is the idea of don't wait until you release things to check if you're secure. Don't try to secure really building in all of these practices from software development to make sure anything you are coding is secure by design. And so I think probably lots more we could delve into, and we can throw some more pointers into our show notes, because I think this is also a topic we could go on forever. But I want to move on to the final topic, which was the third part of the blog, which is all about profile and permission sets. So Sandi, can you do what do I need to know about a profile and what is it permission set?
Sure. Let's level set expectations of like, what are those things? They are both very similar, but they are collections of what can a user or set of users do in the system. So a profile and permission set is just that kind of repository of where you choose what objects a user has the ability to read, to create, to edit, to delete, as well as system permissions. Like, for example, can I have access to certain packages that we just put in? Can I have access to read reports and dashboards? Can I have access to manage other users or other functionality in the system? So the profiles and permission sets are really that kind of instruction manual for the system to understand when a user is logged in, what are they allowed to do in the system.
Got that. I heard some hot news that Salesforce has a strategic shift, discontinuing permissions on profiles by spring 2026 and replacing with permission sets.
Yes, and I actually have an update. So since we wrote this blog, they have actually decided not to enforce that mandate as of 2026. However, it is absolutely a change. They are recommended that you change your strategy towards profiles and permission sets, and I think that this is a good thing on two fronts. Number one, I think that the timeline for getting that in place would have been a very monumental task for a lot of organizations to accomplish. So taking away that mandate, I think, is a really good thing. However, I also think that the moving your approach to giving users permission to do things in the system to a more modular permission set and permission set group approach is just it's the better architectural way to do things. It allows you to be much more flexible and really kind of group functionality together, rather than say, a very common thing is to use a profile for a larger, like maybe the marketing department or the sales team. But occasionally somebody from the sales team, maybe they need to go out on maternity or paternity leave and they need somebody else to do their job. And they need to just access to one additional piece of functionality. So the move to permission sets and permission set groups really kind of allows that flexibility to modulize by what is your objective that you're trying to do in the system, So I learned a little bit at the end of December that Salesforce has decided not to put that mandate in place, but is absolutely a much better way to approach things, to move to permission sets. So
They were
I
getting
think,
too many calls, right? Too many calls from panicked clients being like,
I think
we could
so.
never do it that fast. We
Well,
have
and it's a big job.
thousands of, yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, that's the thing is, you know, when we work with, you know, very large organizations, they literally very often have hundreds of profiles. And so I get that it's a Herculean task to basically eliminate all of those profiles down to, you know, 9 or 10 that are actually relevant, and then create hundreds of permission sets. I get that. But like Sandi said, this is a critical component. And if you think about it practically, it is a huge vulnerability, because now I have literally hundreds of profiles at this at this large enterprise. Um, and and they definitely have access to things that they don't need access to. And then this same profile, it's, you know, that needs access to one more thing. Maybe you introduce a managed package, or you introduce a new data object, and they need access to that. And so you add it to that profile. But now, not only does Bob have access to that, but so does everybody else that's using that profile. Okay, and that's where utilizing profiles to give permissions is such a archaic and inappropriate way to leverage to build security. It's frankly the opposite of building security. It's building insecurity.
And I think,
So,
oh, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Sandy.
I was going to say, when we're talking about here, our topic here is security, and so why are we talking about permission sets and profiles? And I think one of my biggest things is that we have to make sure that we're understanding what are the permissions that we're granting to users, whatever method we choose, whether or not it's permission sets or profiles. Having a true way to kind of keep an eye on that and a good understanding, because again, we're 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 using Salesforce, and then we're allowing users to come in and do things to it, but we are choosing how to set up that user access. And I think having a good plan to do that is a good thing. Just a little
Yeah.
story here. I did some consulting a few years ago for a company that had some lovely interns that were working in their system, and they followed directions pretty well. And they were asked to give permission to a group of users to do a new functionality, right? And so, but when I was checking their work for this permission set, I asked them, well, why do you have this other? You know, they were trying to grant access to one item, but the permission set included many, 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 many permissions for many other completely unrelated things. And they told me, well, I just cloned the one that was existing and added what I wanted, and then was going to give it to the users. So I think in doing that, you can give dangerous permissions like modify all data or that export data that Daniel talked about at the beginning. So keeping an eye on, uh, what are you granting? It's really important to have a good understanding of what's included in those permission sets in groups
Yeah.
or profiles.
It's not something to be done flippantly, but that's actually the beauty of permission sets. Is then I have this one permission set that's highly modular that says this one, that I'm going to give permission to do this one little thing, and so it's a lot easier to manage that rather than a profile that's containing all of these permissions. Nobody, not even the technologist that's responsible for profiles and permission sets, can possibly know and understand how everything that they're giving when the profiles are so complex. Just to drive this point home, in the average org, 44 users have destructive access to data. 44. Okay, that's in the average org. That means that in enterprises, that number is far higher. Destructive access to your data. Okay, and that this is, so architecting this well so that you are managing the access to your data well. It needs to be a much higher priority for many organizations.
Well, modularity, you're speaking my love language. And just like everything we've been talking about today, none of this is an issue until it is. So really, when you're talking about security, it is unlike a feature which you can see and use. It just with Salesforce presents so many vulnerabilities that companies are at. And my guess is the companies don't even know. It's hard to even measure or know your risk. So you're not going to take action on it. And I think this is why we love tools like Hubbl Diagnostics to be able to like just start with a report. You have to be able to even know where you stand. I know from a kind of a permission profile security standpoint, I'm familiar with the concept of least privilege access. So it's how do you make sure you're granting the least amount of access to everybody, right? People should only have information that they actually need to do their jobs, whether you're, and I think what we see, and I'm always like, well, why don't companies do this if it's so obvious? And I think it is as you grow, when you're like, everyone starts small. So you start small and you've got all your customers in one region and everyone's in one office and everyone has access to everything and it's not a big deal. And then as you grow, if you're not thinking about ahead of as you move into different regions or different sectors and you open new branches, how do you start thinking about partitioning and creating security? And Daniel, to your point, if the tool doesn't make it easy to do, you don't do it. And if it's, and if it's easy to just copy and paste, because my job as an admin is like get someone access as soon as possible. And if I don't have the DevSecOps practices of someone telling me about kind of how to integrate security into the practices, it just gets forgotten. So I think we are coming to time in shortly, but I just kind of to summarize, we touched upon managed packages and how to be better at managing them and installing them and keeping them up to date so you don't have security issues, custom code, and all the frightening vulnerabilities that come the minute you customize your Salesforce instance, and profiles and permission sets. Is there anything, Sandi or Daniel, you want to leave our lovely listeners with when it comes to Salesforce and security? What's the one thing they should do today?
Make it a priority to keep track of these things, right? Like I think that's my biggest takeaway is that we have to keep it in mind and make it a priority that we calendar it in to our thought processes about how we use Salesforce.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on what Sandi just said. I was reading last week about the FBI sent out this notice to everybody to start thinking to be aware of this attack called dual ransomware. And the idea behind this is a company gets attacked, and their data is held for ransom. They resolve it, pay the ransom, whatever it is, however they resolved it, and then they jump right back into because they've been out of business. They jump right back into that and try and get back to business and making money without actually prioritizing security even after the first attack. And so the idea behind dual ransomware is to take advantage of this mentality of people rushing back to trying to win more business and attacking them right back again. Okay, and the reason I mention that is because it kind of relates to the human condition. We tend to not make something an issue until it's an issue, and that's a really bad way to operate. And so the one thought that I would leave is whether you do it yourself or you bring somebody in like Tenger Ways to do it for you, make your Salesforce architecture a priority, including and especially the security. And Sandi, we didn't get a chance to talk a lot today about the Salesforce well-architected framework, but we know it. You are a literally world leader in this space, and it's absolutely critical that organizations adopt the Salesforce well-architected framework, and it's something that helps organizations to be more secure, to be able to run their business, but they have to make the investment proactively before it gets to the point where they're regretting the fact that they hadn't invested.
Well said. Well said. Prioritize security, integrate it. Best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is today. So today's the day you make security a priority. Well, that is it, Sandi and Daniel. Thank you for hanging out with me. This was fun. And have a great rest of day. And thank you, everyone who listened. And we'll wrap. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Sandi.
Thank you.